a quick overview of the main things discussed in our first exercise. Uh, Essentially, what we want to do is make sure you guys have a good understanding of the graph editor and the um, essentials of the system to be able to even animate in the first place. What I just did was create a cube in the center up here in my polygons, my poly modeling. Then I want to position it to be animated, just moving it into the center. I did show you guys some pretty cool techniques that are definitely important and useful. D moves my pivot point, so I can pivot from the top, for example, or I can pivot from the bottom. And if I hold V while I'm doing it, or so I go D V like that, it'll snap to the next position. It'll snap to the next plane. So D V D and a V, pull it down, and it snapped to the bottom. Now, if I want to snap that to the grid, I hold the X and do the same thing. Now I'm on the grid. Okay, I'm getting it in position, getting it to the corner, finding my position, and for our exercise today, what I did was I went ahead and I prepared this to be zeroed out, so we were all on the same page. You don't have to do it. In animation, it's not as it's not important. It's generally not even used when we're animating rigs and things like that. You don't want to zero out your shape. We're only doing this to get everybody on the same page. But the way I did that was I went up here and I did a delete history. And that's typically a good way to get it cleaned up, and then do freeze transformations. You see in my channel box, it goes back to 0. So everything's at 0 because otherwise the Maya understands its origin as 0 in the world space, right? So now basically it just set everything back to 0 is the best way to think of it right now. Now what we're trying to do is we're trying to do an animation. We have down here, we have our time slider. We're going to set it to 24 as our global, and that automated my range down here that I'm working in. I can adjust that here. I want to make sure my preferences are set. We're doing it 24 frames per second is our frame rate, and we are set to playback speed at 24 frames per second by 1. And that should play everything in a normal sort of speed, and we want to make sure we are syncing our selection from our channel box to our graph editor, so that way everything is coordinated by the axis that we're working with here. Okay, so next, if you don't see your graph editor, we had an issue in class that some people weren't seeing it. It should show up when you're in your animation workspace. If it doesn't, you can find your graph editor up here in your animation editors, right here under Windows. Okay, you can always tear that off if you need to find stuff. All your panels tear off like that. And now we have our graph editor. If we want to change our interface to be able to work in different views, well, this is our perspective view, and we also have different kinds of layouts in our panels view inside of our window. And I'm going to choose, let's say 3 pane split across the bottom. Right, this is just my example. You can do whatever works for you. Usually for our purposes, probably a single panel for this exercise would probably be fine. Okay, so now this is our viewer. This is how we see what's happening in the 3D world, and then underneath the hood, a little bit further, we have it down here happening in our graph editor. So this is our outliner over here. We're gonna name that. I'm gonna name my file so I know what it is when I go looking. If I have different cubes, let's call it cube 1. Let's call it animation cube. Animation cube 1, like that. I don't generally use spaces in Maya. Maya has never done really well with spaces between things, so I always do another kind of variation. So In order to get it animated, we have to set our keyframes. Looks like I'm not quite at 0, so I'll set it right back at 0. Oh, I moved it over. It's fine. I'm starting a range of 0 to 24. So I showed you a couple of methods of setting your keyframe. One is if you want to set only your translation, you can do Shift. So, sorry, let me back up a little bit. Your shortcut for moving will be W on your keyframe, and your rotation is an E, and your R is your scale. Okay, and all of these are over here. So what we're trying to do right now is just animate the translate, which is the move. And if you have trouble finding your move tool or your rotation, it's up here in transformation tools, modified transformation tools. You've got them right here. Okay, you also have them over here in the corner. But generally, as you're working, you're going to be using your shortcuts all the time because it's kind of obstructive to go over and find them up here all the time. So use your shortcut keys W, E, and R. W, E, and R. Your hands should be right there at it all the time. Looks like I set a keyframe. Let's go back and let's find it. So it's right here. I'm going to delete those. So nothing is keyed. I don't see any red over here, and I don't see any red down here, and I don't see any points on the graph editor. So now I'm going to start at 0, and I'm going to set a keyframe on just the X, Y, and Z using Shift W. Shift and W. See, set my keyframe at 0. Now I'm going to 24, and I'm going to move it. Don't set the keyframe until you move it, and don't do anything else until you set your keyframe. Because if I do anything else now, it's going to lose knowledge of what I just did because I haven't set a keyframe there. The Maya does not know that that's where I want this to be at this point in time because there's nothing down here representing it. There's nothing up there representing it. See? I lost my animation, right? So I want to get that in position, and I can do the same thing, Shift W, set another keyframe there, right? And so on. I'm not going to show you the whole project, but I want you to at least understand the method and a couple other things that we did down here. We set this to 48, and we can drag the slider over, or we can set this to 48 and it'll automatically update. Right? So that's how your sliders work. And so we can see we have animation down here on our time slider. That same animation is showing up on the graph editor, but only on the keys. Only the keys that have, only the axes that have been animated will show a keyframe change, right? So in theory, I can even really delete the ones that I don't need until I do need it. The reason why we've been keeping it there is because we're keeping this exercise simple and animating on every 24 frames. So that way you always know that on those frames there is a keyframe somewhere. And when animation gets complicated, you might have keys on every single one of these frames for different kinds of controllers. And that's when it's useful to delete unnecessary keyframes. But one of the problems of deleting the keyframes is you might forget to set a keyframe. So you might do the whole animation and get to the end, you don't have your keyframe set, and you set a keyframe now, and you needed it, but you don't have it down here, so you have to go back and find that position that you needed, if that makes sense. So for now, we're keeping all of our keyframes without deleting them. It's up to you if you want to delete them. In fact, it's a good practice to not have them unless you need them, but for our purposes, it's fine. So the other method for setting your keyframe is just simply an S. So if you push S, it's going to key everything. See what happened there? I now have all of my attributes keyed. And so that works, it's fine, but it means everything. And even if I'm not using it, it's been keyed. So you can see the point in the graph over here is has been set for everything. And of course it's been set for the ones that have already been started. We'll go over more things in the graph editor, but this is the first sort of introduction to make sure that you guys understand it. And there's one more way, oh actually there's two more ways you can set a keyframe. So let's get this to 72. So now I just need to make sure my cursor is at 72, right? So let's say I want to do another animation. I'm just going to go over here. And I want to set a keyframe. I can do it up here as well. The problem with that in this particular case is I moved several axes, right? I didn't do the rotation, but I can always just select all three of these and go key selected, and it'll do the same thing I just did with the shortcut Shift and W. If I want to just key the x-axis, it'll work, but when I go back and play it, it didn't follow the path. So all three of those axes needed to be keyed. The other way you can key it is very simple. You just select it and you go up here, key, set, key. Up here in your if you're in your animation workspace, it'll show up right here. If you don't see it, you might have found yourself in the wrong workspace. Okay, so up here, key, set key, did the exact same thing as the S does. All of this is selected. Okay, F frames up whatever is selected. So if you push F as your short key, it'll frame that up. If I push A, it frames up all. It frames up everything. It frames up the whole selection, everything that's within that selection. So A and F are two really important keyframes. W, E, and R are very important. Shortcuts. And W, E, and R are very important shortcuts. And the D, eventually you're going to find it to be important for moving your pivot point. As you can see, my pivot point is still on the bottom. If I want that pivot point back to where I was, I go to Modify, Center Pivot, and it's right back in the middle. It said it's center origin, center point. And we'll go over some more things. There's a lot to cover, even in the graph editor. We're just going to be constantly studying things about the graph editor. But that gets you started to be able to do your exercise. Rotation, as we were talking about, you can rotate it like this. You can rotate it like that. But when you rotate it using your manipulator, notice how if you only want to rotate one axis, you want to make sure that one axis is held, because you can accidentally do something like this, and you see over in the channel box, it's rotating everything, right? And it's similar in translation, but translation, you see how if you hold it in the center and you do it like that, it's doing everything. Generally, it's a lot more intuitive with the translation. You're going to be doing this, and it's a good practice to do one axis at a time. That way you prevent what's called gimbal lock, which we'll go over at some point. You prevent problems basically by doing one thing at a time. There's going to be times where you might want to pull this over here real quick, but generally, if you're thinking in three different axes, you're going to be much better off. So it looks like I've got my world space all messed up. I mean, my object space all messed up, which that's another topic we'll cover in the future. I think that pretty much covers what we went today. Just make sure that when you get down to do your animation, your jump of the box, it should be on your vertical axis, right? So now you're moving up your vertical axis. And it's obviously moving all of these because I don't have this perfectly lined up. I made a mistake there in my process of rotating. So yeah, you just key your vertical, and you can see it happening over here. You can do all your operations in the graph editor. You can do every single operation that you're doing with your manipulator is happening down there. It's happening in time. I'm moving it down in time. It's happening earlier if I move it down here. It's happening later here. it's a lower jump down here, it's a higher jump up here, and so on. Same thing goes with the rotation. I can rotate down here as well. I've got a bad selection tool here. You can see it rotating up there. Same thing is happening there. So it all works on the same principle. And I think that'll be a good start for the graph editor, and hopefully that catches you guys up to any gaps left in the quickly moving pace of the class. Thanks, guys.